our two lead glass backgrounds that we worked on. We're going to shade with a little bit of asphaltum. Alright, so we're just going to float shade down some of these areas just to kind of define the shape. I think I'm going to go underneath this one. Just gives a little more definition. It isn't really vital, I just think it adds a little bit of that antique look to these. So I'm going to go ahead and do some more of that. I'll show you when I'm finished. So I think you can see how some of those are a little darker, some are a little lighter. It just defines and gives that antique appearance. Now let's talk about this one. Would do the same thing with the asphaltum. Just kind of coming down like this, going around the shapes and the spaces. And I would finish that one up. And we're also going to add a little bit of a metallic gold. I like this fluid acrylic from Deco Art. I like the media gold. So we're going to use some of that. We're going to use it just a soft brush like this. Thin it down a little bit. I'm just going to put some in. And then just mop it out. Just giving it that kind of little bit of a glow, similar to what the glass would have. And I may not fill in the entire, I may just do part of the panes. Alright, can you see all that? I think it definitely has given it a little bit of a glow. I'm going to take some Snow White onto my palette. I'm going to use a filbert comb, and mine is actually Jo Sonia's. I'm going to use a little bit of white, thin down, and I'm just going to do a little reflection into the panes of glass. And I'm just going to go diagonal, kind of randomly. It's very subtle. Just gives that reflection of glass. And I don't know if you can actually see that or not, but there is just a little bit of a hint of a reflection in there. I have shaded this one I've added the gold. You can see the gold when I tilt it. And you could just compare it to this one as well. And look at the gold in there. Isn't that pretty? I've added a little bit of a foreground piece to the bottom of this one. And I'm using a black Posca pen, which is a black acrylic paint marker. You could use black acrylic paint too. And I'm just going to outline this. And then I'm just going to outline each one of the stones. And I'm not being terribly precise because they're stones. All right, there we have it. We are going to use burnt sienna, and we are going to just float in our bricks. So we've already basically got a base color for them already on there. You could paint them in if you want to. I just kind of like the way this looks. Okay, there we have it. Some of them are a little darker, some of them are a little lighter. Next, I'm going to take a little bit of that gold and I'm just going to kind of just lay it across here randomly. Just adding some in there. Some of them are dark, some of them are light. And can you see the gold on there? Let's darken some of these in with a little bit of asphaltum. And I don't want to darken everything in. I'm just going to add a few darker areas. And mostly just towards the bottom. All right. I'm ready to add some flowers. I have a number of different sizes for you in your line art, and you can pick which sizes do you want. But I think for this one I'm going to go with these three. I'm going to decide what combination of these papers do I want to use. Because I have three, so I have some choices. And I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to choose one flower to come out of this paper right here. And I'm going to trace around this. And you'll notice I cut out these little divots in the center. And you can see that I've traced around it. So I'm just going to set that aside for now. I'm going to choose this larger one. I'm going to let this flower kind of go out into the white section of this paper. I don't know if you can see that or not. That one is traced. And then this smaller one, I'm going to go with this lighter piece of paper. I'll go just like that. Okay, and that one. So when I come back, I will have these cut out. I determined where I wanted my 3 flowers, and I cut them out. So the one thing I've done is I've transferred the petals, and I cut out, you can see where I cut out some of those little triangle shapes from my floral shapes, because I want this white to kind of show through. So now this is the last one that I need to do. So now I'm going to sketch on my flower. You could most definitely transfer this if you wanted to, but I'm actually going to draw it. The other thing I'm doing is I'm working on arranging my leaves onto my background behind where I want my flowers. Now you can just use the line art that I've given you if you prefer, or you could take a stab at arranging your flowers and your leaves however you might like to have them. So I am tracing my leaves onto my gel printed paper, and I'm going to cut them out. I've removed my flowers, I've cut all my leaves, and I just did a real quick pencil registration line to show where I want to place these leaves, and I also sketched in where I want some of my stems to be. But once I decoupage over the top of it, those stems are going to be there. So I need to make some decisions. So I'm going to use just decoupage, which is my medium of choice. And I like to lay my decoupage down onto my background paper. Put my decoupage on the back of my leaf. Place my leaf down over those, I call them registration marks, where I can see where I want to place my leaf. And then I'm going to let that sit. I'm not going to go over the top of it yet. I'm going to do the same thing to each one of these leaves. And is always the case, when you are using decoupage, use an old brush that you don't care about, because decoupage will ruin your brush. And I have to put my leaves on first because some of my flowers are going to go over the top of some of my leaves. I'm going to go back over the top of my leaves. Just finished gluing them down. Okay, so some registration marks for my flowers as well. So I'm just going to lay those down to make sure I've got everything lined up where I want them to go. Now, if you have a different method for doing this, by all means use it. You don't have to use mine. These are a little thicker because I did not use deli paper for these, so these will take a little more manipulation to get them glued down. All right, everything's glued on. Now I have to let this dry completely. I could force dry it with a hairdryer. I kind of like to just let it dry naturally. I will be back in just a minute when this is dry, and we'll add some more details. Then I had added one more leaf when we were off camera. I just felt like it needed one more leaf. And I may have wished that I would have put some leaves up in here, but I'm going to leave it be for now and make that decision once we're finished painting everything. I chose to use mermaid tail to shade my leaves with. It's a pretty dark turquoise color. You would not have to use this. Any dark turquoise color that you have that is a good complement to the colors that you used when you were gel printing will work just fine. I'm just going to shade this one just a little bit. I'm not going to shade all of these, as I think you'll get the idea. But I'm going to shade a few of them just to need to shade underneath this leaf. Okay, so that's our first layer. I'm going to finish these up. I'll be right back. I decided to go back over my shadows with a little bit of Hauser Dark Green. So I'm going to use the same brush. I'm going to use a really, really thin glaze float because I really don't want to get rid of my turquoise blue. I just want to enhance it just a little bit. So there is that one. So I'll do the rest of these and I'll be back. Okay, I just added a little bit of a glaze float of green to that. And then take a little bit of Hot Shots or fluorescent yellow, scorching yellow, which is and I'm just going to lay a little bit in here and there. Okay. So I'm just taking a little bit of Snow White and just a little dry brush, and I'm just going to dry brush a little bit of Snow White into the leaves. And it's very, very subtle. Very, very subtle. Just added just another dimension. With that Hauser dark green, I'm using a script liner, and I'm just going to add some stems. Go over them again. I think we'll let that dry. Let's shade our flowers. To shade our flowers, we're going to use some Napa Red. And because I am floating on paper, it's not going to move as easily as if I were floating on wood. So I'm going to look at each flower, and I'm just going to kind of bring that paint color down like that. Same thing over here. And it's kind of a, I like to use kind of a pity-pat type application. This petal right here is underneath, so I'm going to pull my colors so it gives that shadow underneath. Same with this one. Okay, so that has changed the look of those petals just slightly. I need to finish adding in my shaded color right up here next to the center. Then I'm going to let that dry and work on the other one. This one is underneath. And even though I'm going to cut most of that off, I'm going to come clear out to the end. Okay, I'm going to let that dry. I'm going to do the top one. Okay, let's put a second coat on this one. Okay, I'm going to add a second coat to this one, but I think we're going to have to deepen the shadow on this one. We're going to try a little bit of soft black, just a glaze float of it. And I think that kind of did what I wanted it to do. It just kind of darkened our red just a little bit. We're going to use Scorching Yellow Neon. We're going to give this kind of a generous amount. So we don't want to glaze float this on at all. We really want this to pick up and highlight the white or the lighter colors in our flower. We really want this scorching yellow to kind of emphasize the pattern that we developed in our flowers. Now let's do this one. Okay, that looks beautiful. This one I'm going to go back over the top with my neon scorching yellow and add another layer to it because it doesn't show up well. And I'm going to go back over the top of this one. Okay, those are looking pretty good. Now the center. We're going to use Peacock Teal to shade with. So I'm just going to come right here right along the bottom a little bit. And just kind of walk that out a little bit. That looks good. Same thing with this one. So I'm assuming my light source is coming from this direction. Because it's kind of a whimsical flower, I can kind of make that decision. And this one. Okay, I'm going to put a second coat on that. Do you see that when you glaze float over the top of these patterns that it kind of emphasizes the pattern to a degree? I want to add a little bit more of a highlight. So I'm going to take a little bit of Snow White. So I'm going to take a little bit of this and I'm just going to dry brush lightly right over the top of my highlighted area. Just lightly. I'm just going to give it a little bit of a lighter area. I'm going to do a little bit up here in the center of each one of these, just in the highlighted areas. This is very thin very subtle. Using that same brush, I'm going to rinse it. I'm going to use that same brush. I'm going to go back over some of the areas with the Neon Scorching Yellow, just with a slightly damp dry brush. I want this to be a little bit more random looking rather than a float. I'm just tapping it. You could mop it. I'm just tapping it with my finger. I'm going to add some more of this. That looks great. For this next step, I can use one of two things. I can use a white gel pen or a white acrylic marker, or I can use white paint and a script liner. But I'm going to use this. I like my Posca pen. This is a PC1MR. It's a super, super small nib to it. So I'm going to just add a little bit of a white highlight here, maybe a couple dots. Same thing here. And this one. I'm going to do the same thing on all of these petals. Just right over the top of the highlighted area. But again, you could use a white script liner and just white paint. Just adds an additional little highlight. I'm going to use an 03 black micron, and I'm going to outline these slightly. So I'm going to start up here and just outline. And I'm just going to bring a black shade line down the side. Same thing here. And I can add a little bit of a fold in the petal. And I can come all the way down if I want to. And use kind of a wiggly line, because this is, you know, a petal is not always perfect. They tend to be a little wavy. So I can go all the way around it, like that, or I can just outline those areas that have the overlap, whichever you prefer. I'm going to go all the way around because I kind of like the way it defines the shape a little bit more. going to bring this down with a couple dots, and then I'm going to add a couple dots coming across here, just to lighten that up just a bit. Okay. I think you only really need to watch me do one on camera. But I'm going to outline the rest of these and I'll be back in a flash. I've outlined each of my flowers, and I really think that that makes them pop. And you can see where I used a really wiggly line. So now let's outline our leaves. And I'm going to start right here in the center. And I'm not going to connect my line. Some of them I'm going to, some I'm not, some I'm going to, because again, I think this gives the leaf a little bit of movement. You can go around the outside edge of your leaf. I don't really think I need to, so I'm not going to. Again, use that wiggly line. And if you see somewhere where you think, I need a little bit more definition, just add it. It's a little bit of a black line. Thought that area needed a little more definition. And what can you do with this? Well, I could actually decoupage the whole thing onto a 5x7 inch board. I have some, or a 5x7 inch canvas, and it could just be a standalone piece of art. I can also cut this out and it could become a card. So thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoyed this. I'll see you at my next demo. Till we meet again.